And welcome back to Newsmax Now. Grover Norquist made an anti-tax pledge that may be hurting Republicans in some hard-hit states.
Yeah, some states like Nevada, Kansas, and Alabama are debating increasing taxes to fund things like education and infrastructure. Republicans struggle to find a solution to their $1.6 billion budget gap in Louisiana. Now, some are saying Governor Bobby Jindal, not Grover Norquist, should be the point man in state budget negotiations. This is just a great place to right now bring in our roundtable.
And please welcome to our roundtable President ForAmerica, or of ForAmerica, David Bozell. Also rejoining us is political editor for the Washington Examiner and author of Devouring Freedom, Can Big Government Ever Be Stopped? W. James Antle III. Thank you for sticking around, and thank you both for joining us here Friday for this roundtable. So let's start with you, David. Would Governor Jindal be a better man for the job?
Well, he's the governor, and he should be able to figure out his own budget issues. And he's a big boy. He can figure that out without Grover Norquist's help. He did the right thing, cutting taxes, slashing the budget, trying to preserve taxpayer resources for Louisianans. And I'm sure he'll figure it out. He's been a good governor, two-term governor. They'll be just fine.
But Jim, wouldn't you agree at some points Grover Norquist has almost handcuffed some Republicans with this anti-tax pledge? It limits their options. Certainly in most cases they would forego increasing taxes, but at least it's no longer an option on the table.
Well, you know, Grover Norquist is a very influential conservative activist, but I think a lot of people overstate the degree to which Republicans simply do his bidding. Grover Norquist has been a big supporter of comprehensive immigration reform. Republicans haven't, started moving toward his position on that. Grover Norquist has been more civil libertarian on some of the surveillance and Patriot Act related issues, and only a relatively small subset of the party is embracing him on that. The reason Republicans feel handcuffed by the tax pledge is it is actually popular with their voters for Republicans not to raise taxes.
All right, let's talk about another big... I'm sorry, did you want to say something, David?
Well, I'd agree with the premise that I think Grover's influence is a little over-exaggerated, especially at the state level.
All right, let's talk about something else that's been in the headlines today. We're expecting a vote from the House. Last night, the president's push for that large-scale trade deal cleared a very important hurdle, but today's vote on the worker assistance program is central to larger trade debate. Let's take a listen. Okay, we're trying to hear House Speaker John Boehner.
Our allies will gravitate back towards China, away from us, and away from our workers. So we're doing our part to pass Trade Promotion Authority, and I'm hopeful that our friends on the other side of the aisle will do theirs.
All right, President Obama went to Capitol Hill this morning, trying to make that final plea to congressional Democrats before the vote. Could the deal fail at the hands of his own party? W. James.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think that the deal could fail. I mean, you're facing a fact that you have a lot of Republicans that don't trust giving authority to President Obama, and a lot of Democrats who don't support free trade. And for a president who's in love with the sound of his own voice and entranced by his persuasive powers, when he's turned this charm offensive, that he's been using against the Republicans for a long time on his own party, congressional Democrats have not been very impressed by it. And it'll be really interesting to see how this plays out.
Yeah, and David, apparently this meeting took about a half hour. The president meeting with these Democrats, and it looks like a lot of the Democrats really didn't come away too impressed.
Didn't seem to impress anybody up there. This bill has just made for some really odd, strange bedfellows. You've got the Speaker of the House and the President, seemingly new BFFs on trade. Ted Cruz has been way out in front of this in support of it for a long, long time. That's kind of... I was in a congressional office yesterday. I had two receptionists answering phones. One was answering a phone call from a member of the AFL-CIO. The other one was answering a phone call from a complaint from a conservative organization. So it's just been an odd string of events with this bill. And I think people's frustration, folks, is just that why does everything have to happen, A, at the last minute, B, behind closed doors, and in this case, in the basement of Capitol Hill, where only members can go see it without sharing it, with the details of it, with their staffs, with the public. It may be the greatest piece of legislation since sliced bread, but just be straight shooters with the people who put you in office and show the text. And if there's something that needs to be redacted, just explain why. And I think reasonable folks would accept it.
And we're just receiving word. I have my producer telling me that right now the House has, they're voting on that trade adjustment assistance. And right now only 14 Democrats say yes.
It's going to be a very... Does anyone know? I'd love to know what the number that they need.
Can we say that? Sarah, do you know, what was it? 14 Democrats say yes, and was it 30 that say no?
So we're early in the process, and it's something that we're going to continue, obviously, and we'll be following it right here on Newsmax Now. So 44 Democrats voting, obviously much more than 100 still to go. We'll be following those numbers for you and have more of the conversation right here on Newsmax Now.
And we want to welcome in our roundtable once again. Rejoining us is Jim Antle of the Washington Examiner, also known by W. James Antle III. And rejoining us is David Bozell, President ForAmerica. Thank you both for sticking around.
Yeah, and former Florida Governor Jeb Bush set to announce his running for president on June 15th at Miami-Dade College. The last couple of months, he's been acting like a presidential candidate, granting interviews, raising donations. We showed you earlier on Newsmax Now meeting with the Polish president. So I wanted to ask you first, Jim. Again, he hasn't officially announced, but the first 2 months, there's been some bumps in the road. But overall, how do you think he's performing right now as a pre-candidate?
Well, I think it's very interesting. On the one hand, when it comes to raising money and building an organization, he's done very well. Maybe not to some of the fundraising expectations, the high fundraising expectations that had been set before he started, but certainly raising much more money than anybody else and hiring and putting in place a pretty good team. But on the stump and in interviews, I think he definitely comes across as a guy who hasn't really run for office since 2002, has been out of office since 2007, has been kind of rusty, kind of bland. And, given his huge name ID advantage, he's really not doing overwhelmingly great in the polls. He's, around first place, but it's a very weak first place, bunched in with a lot of other candidates, not really scaring very many other people besides Mitt Romney out of the race.
Yeah, and David, he does seem a little bit rusty, especially when the Iraq question came up just a couple of weeks ago. It didn't seem like he really had a solid answer when he was trying to address that. How do you view his first couple of months into the campaign?
I think rusty's being kind. Sometimes he doesn't look like he has a pulse out there. Congratulations to Jeb Bush for getting into the race in about a week or so. He cannot win. He cannot win a general election against Hillary Clinton. Number one, we've seen that movie before, a Bush versus Clinton. We know how that turns out. Number two, this is a man who gave a Lifetime Achievement Award to Hillary Clinton for her performance while in public service. We're not going to bore your audience going through the alphabet soup of scandals that the Clintons have been involved in while in public service. But it would be intellectually dishonest for Jeb Bush, if he were to become the nominee, to criticize and be critical of Hillary Clinton's record, which he will need to do, while having given her a Lifetime Achievement Award for that very same public service. It would actually be also intellectually dishonest for any conservative commentator, any part of the apparatus of the Republican Party, to be critical of Hillary Clinton's record while their nominee has given her a Lifetime Achievement Award for public service. That's why I think he simply cannot win.
So you don't think you can separate the two, because some people would argue otherwise, that you can separate the two. And let's be honest, the Clintons and Bush have been friends for quite some time. They don't really try to hide that, although I'm sure things will be different now. But question for you, it seems like Clinton, it's been working for her having that name, working more for her than it has for Bush. Would you agree with that, David?
Well, her I don't know, because her negatives are the highest in 14 years. You've got close to 60% of the country that simply doesn't trust her. That is not a good spot.
Right, but she is basically seen as the front runner, and Bush is not.
Well, there's no Democratic bench. There's no one a real threat to Hillary Clinton. Whereas on the Republican side, there's just a talented group of candidates out there. who have been engaging with the president, President Obama, for upwards of his entire administration. So it's a talented group of candidates. There doesn't seem to be. I mean, this is Governor Bush. He was last in elected office before Facebook was invented. These campaigns that he's up against are very familiar with digital communications, social media communications, and it's going to be a real challenge to see if Jeb Bush, the candidate, could marshal his campaign to do the same.
Wanted to ask you, Jim, about Hillary's competitors on the Democratic side, Bernie Sanders, outlining plans for a family values agenda. Do you believe that this is going to take Hillary Clinton a little bit more to the left? Bernie Sanders seems to be coming out with a new rollout, a new government program almost every day now.
Yeah, I mean, Bernie Sanders is one of the more honest Democrats. He calls himself a socialist, so that he doesn't really, pretend otherwise. I think, Hillary is already moving to the left because she knows that's where the center of gravity in her party is. I think Bernie Sanders and some of these other candidates, Lincoln Chafee, Martin O'Malley, maybe Jim Webb, will have some effect on Hillary, but so far they've been so unwilling to criticize her. Bernie Sanders refused to criticize her over her Iraq war vote, even though that was the main thing Barack Obama used to beat her in 2008. This is a field that they're proposing all these new government programs, which I think Hillary will generally be fine with going along with, but they're not really drawing the kinds of distinctions and making the kind of criticisms that give them any opportunity to seize an opening against her. And until that changes, I think the Democratic race will mostly be tuned out.
Gentlemen, I'm sorry, but we're running out of time. We'll have to leave it there. Jim and David, thank you both for joining us here on Newsmax Now. We'll be right back.